Warriors fall in. It's time for formation. Today, I have my old man on the other end of the video and the mic joining us on the podcast today because I want to talk to him about something that I think wanes on a lot of the minds of parents out there who have children who decide to join the military. And it's probably something that we didn't really think about early in 98 when I signed up to join the Army National Guard, and then later on decided to go active duty Army. Kind of set a course for myself to be in the military, and then of course September 11th happens, and then we get into two huge wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. And I know that when I got my commission, I knew that at some point I would probably deploy, but I just didn't know when. I knew it was inevitable, but I just didn't know when that would happen. I didn't think it would happen at such a quick pace. But at any rate, Dad, how you doing today?
Doing pretty good. Nice and hot here in Ohio.
With you being in the military, you've been to quite a few duty stations, and being a small town kid from Kentucky, what was it like when you were in the military for those 20 years, experiencing the winters in Germany and the summer climates in Hawaii and everywhere else you were at? I mean, because you came from a small town in the middle of nowhere, Kentucky, right?
Yeah,
That was your world.
Yeah, thought that was the world. Well, I didn't think too much of the cold winters in Germany and Korea, but I kind of enjoyed some of the summers in Hawaii. And I was also stationed down in Cocoa Beach, Florida for a while, believe it or not, as an infantryman. And I enjoyed that weather down there too. I just never did care for the cold weather. Had enough of it in Kentucky, Fort Knox.
You spent a good 5 years down there at Fort Knox, right?
More than that. I spent 5 years on drill status there. And then I spent a year in an infantry company. They only had one infantry company on the base, and I spent a year in that company. And I spent a couple of years in BRM committee group, what it was called then, working on a rifle range before I became a drill sergeant.
I guess you were kind of fortunate because you were pretty close to home, weren't you?
Yeah, I wasn't far, 3 hours maybe from home when I was at Knox. Actually, I was at Knox. I came from Germany to Fort Knox, and I was only there for a year until I got orders to go to Vincennes, Italy. But my mother was in the hospital, and she was dying with cancer, and I got a letter from the doctor and turned it in to the hospital or somebody at Fort Knox. I can't remember, whoever you turn that kind of stuff into, and they gave me a deferment, and I stayed there for another 6 years, I think. Although,
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
mm-hmm.
It's interesting. Yeah, you were very fortunate back then. You were drafted in '71 during the Vietnam War, and just due to your training and everything, you weren't sent that way, but you were sent the opposite way to Germany. So the idea of war, I guess, was kind of still remnant in your mind because you had been through it during Vietnam. I'm sure you had a lot of friends. I know we had some family members go to Vietnam as well, right?
Yeah, we did. Had some uh, people, I guess. It wasn't family members, but people that I went to school with, very, very good friends with. And 3 or 4 of them didn't make it back from Vietnam. But, the people from high school I knew especially well didn't make it back from Vietnam. I knew I was from that big city in northeastern Kentucky called Moorhead, where Moorhead State University is. And matter of fact, my best friend that I kind of grew up in my teen years with was the very first person from Round County, Kentucky, killed in the Vietnam War.
Wow.
And then the guy I played football with, big old fella, he was killed over there. One of my good friends was killed there, but he was killed by one of his buddies, and it was murder. His buddy killed him. He was charged with murder. And then another guy that was a little older than me, but he was related to me on through marriage, was killed over there. So I knew a few that didn't make it back from Vietnam. A few from a small town like that is like having a whole lot from a big town, you know.
Yeah.
So it touched the community.
And you went your entire career, for the most part, without having any major conflicts between 71 and 91. I mean, we had things here and there, and we had a few things here and there, but nothing as major as Vietnam or anything like Iraq or Afghanistan, right?
No, it wasn't nothing real dangerous.
Because even when I went to basic training in '99, we were still training for the Russians to come over the berm. You know, from the Cold War, we were doing the whole stand to thing and everything else, building the hasty position in the morning and the whole 9 yards. And warfare changed completely to urban warfare when we went into Iraq and Afghanistan. And I know that when you had me sign up in 98, 99, was the thought of war even in your mind at all?
No, it really wasn't, because I had gone for so long without being in a war, or the United States had gone for so long without being in a war. I just didn't see it, you know. And when the war did start, like you said, it was more of an urban warfare, which rendered all the training that I'd done for 20 years, rendered it all worthless.
Yeah, yeah. It's crazy
I was,
because
I was, I was ready to go out and fight in the jungles, you know, and sneak up, try to sneak through the dried leaves without making noise and stuff like that. And that wouldn't have been any good.
So I signed up for the military in 1998, technically, at the end of 1998. Went in the National Guard in 1999, did 4 years, went to college, got my commission, decided to commission. That was completely for my country. I could have gotten out in 4 years with my bachelor's degree and walked out, and I wanted to go active duty, which is what you instructed me early on. You stopped me from going active duty right out of high school. You instructed me to get my degree first and then decide if I wanted to go active duty, which I think is pretty wise. Pretty wise advice, and I'm glad that you gave me that advice, because had I had just gone in and enlisted, I probably would not have been able to get my bachelor's degree back then. I mean, now it's a little different, but like you said before, you had said, "Hey, you know, I remember when I was in charge of folks. You know, if we had something to do, and then they had college, well, they were going to do what we had to do first."
Yeah. During that time, the Cold War era, soldiers signed up for college. The Army really did, and my units really did bend over backwards to try to not interfere with their education the best they could. But, you know, if a deployment or something came up, then they had to put that on the back burner. But that really wasn't very often.
Right.
We tried to do everything we could to keep them going to school.
Yeah. Well, I appreciated you giving me that advice. And then, so when I joined the military, like I said, by this time it was 2003 when I got my commissioning, and September 11th was well underway. In 2001, we were active in Iraq and Afghanistan. At this time, it was pretty hot in Iraq. Afghanistan kind of cooled off a little bit. End of 2003, Fallujah happens, of course. And then later that year, I deploy to Iraq as a second lieutenant. So we're talking about I'm literally fish bait in the scheme of things when it comes to the rank structure of officers. I am like the bottom. But at any rate, so I deploy as literally the lowest of low rank for a commissioned officer, and then my job is as a platoon leader for a transportation platoon, which, you know, back then there was a lot of IEDs getting set out, a lot of attacks on the logistical lines going to and from different points on the main supply routes in Iraq. Can you talk to me a little bit about how you felt about your son now having to go pay his dues and serve his country?
Yeah, I knew you was going to ask that question, so I've had time to think about that a little bit. And I just guess I have to be quite honest. I thought about when you asked me that question, what am I going to say? And I think it's so different for everybody, as far as I know, that there is really no definite answer. I can't put in words my feelings, I guess. Your feelings are what you feel inside, and words just don't describe it and make a picture out of it for you. But I can tell you it was a time with the media and the coverage of the wars and what was going on in Iraq at the time. It was I've never been so worried in my life. I mean, it's just something you can't describe. You see what you see on TV, and of course, they try to dramatize it and reach the hearts of the American people, I guess, with the news. And but I think it did reach the hearts of Americans that were involved, that had a relative or a child over there.
Yeah.
But I'm not really sure, even to this day, I'm not real sure if the same coverage reached the heart of the average American that wasn't involved in it in any way. I could tell if you go out and you try to mention, oh, I got a son in Iraq and he's running convoy. Oh, that's nice. What's the weather going to be like tomorrow? But they wasn't really interested.
Right.
So, but for the person, for myself, I can remember just waiting and hoping every day. I knew I wasn't going to get a phone call every day. I knew that, but I kept hoping and waiting for that phone call just to ensure me that everything was okay and you made it through another day. And it really felt good. My phone rang and I looked and it was a call from you, because I knew that gave me another day and another convoy to worry about.
I can't imagine what it must have been like, because at the time you were still working, going to work, and I'm sure the subject came up a number of times with some of your coworkers and your friends who didn't have any vested interest. And I'm sure that they said things that probably hit you to the bone and might have hit home for you. Is that right?
Yeah. And before that, though, I say I was working in a factory, and they couldn't work and talk on the cell phone, so I actually volunteered to go on third shift because they had less bosses there, less people to watch you. So when you called, I knew on third shift I'd be able to answer the phone, run to the door where I could get better reception and talk to you for a while. But yeah, most people were sympathetic with the soldiers in Iraq. From what I noticed, though, seemed like the women were the ones that made the comments that I didn't like, and it was when I would show them a picture of a catastrophic event that happened over there, and they would look at the picture and they would say, "Why are you showing that to people? Why would anybody want to see that?" And I said, "Well, because that's what our young men and women that are in Iraq, that's what they're doing. That's what they're fighting for. That's what they live with every day. It's not who would want to see it. My thought, everybody should see it. Everybody in the United States should see the truth over there, not just what the media pants and puts on there." And I don't know, maybe it's because women are just a little more soft-hearted or what. They didn't want to see some of the gore and stuff, but most most everybody else that I knew pretty sympathetic and pretty understanding, and most of them that I cared enough about to associate with on a daily basis that I worked with. Usually, every couple of 3 days, they would ask how you were doing over there.
Yeah.
I was happy to say that, as far as I know, everything's still good.
It also helps too that I worked there for a few summers, right? So at
Yeah,
the factory,
yeah,
some of the people knew me.
yeah. They knew you personally, and I
Right.
guess they were probably thinking, "This is the young man that used to be here. Is the same one we're talking about that's in Iraq doing his duty." Yeah,
I know that sometimes people can say things that can be not very sensitive to folks that are actually feeling the burden of something like that. And I know you had mentioned that to me before, but some of the pictures you were showing people were the pictures that I in the videos I would send you, right?
yes,
Yeah.
yeah. They were the truth. I mean, it was. I knew that that's what you saw for real on a daily basis. And if the soldiers, if you and all the other soldiers on active duty that were stationed over there were seeing that every day, why would I not want people here to see what you're going through and see what you're seeing?
That was my reality.
Yeah.
Right.
And I was wanting to make it their reality too.
And I almost want to say that while I was there, I felt like my mind and my body almost went to a I don't know, I guess I could describe it as a sleepwalking phase, because there were things that happened where I didn't put a whole lot of thought into it, but later down the road I thought about it and I was like, why the hell did I do that? Like, that was pretty dangerous, or that was not very smart, or that could have been that could have ended very badly for me. Um, and I plan on sharing some of those stories later on. It's taken me a very long time to talk about those things specifically. It's the one thing that I've learned over the years is going back to a time of your life where you felt stress and anxiety to a point where you thought maybe this might be it is not easy for someone to talk about. It's not something that I've shared with a lot of people over the years. So since having that perspective, and having gone through that situation that you've been through with me, going to war and everything going on in the world right now. I mean, the world is on fire. The world is
Yeah.
on fire right now, and it's. Uh, I don't think a lot of people are thinking about war. I think people are thinking about war, but they're not thinking about the idea of them being a part of it. Okay,
Yeah, exactly.
it's more of a spectator sport for a lot of folks, in my opinion. I think people see it as kind of like something you watch on TV, but not something that you do. What are your what advice do you have for parents out there that have kids that are either in right now or plan on going into war, or not war, going into the military and might go to war?
Mm. Yeah, that's tough.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't know if I could really give them advice except just what we used to say in the Army, uh, hope for the best and prepare for the worst. Because if you have a son or daughter in the military and they're not in a combat zone, that's the best. But if they go to a combat zone and you see on the news that it's exact location where they're stationed is in heavy conflict, that's going to be the worst. That's when the worst will hit home. That's when you'll wish that they had never joined the service.
Right.
I used to think I used to, sit up at night and wonder how well you were getting along and what you were doing. And I remember thinking specifically, why do these teenagers, young men in their young 20s, maybe get thrown into combat and doing things that they have never done and have to grow up so fast? They should. This is what I was thinking. I was
Mm-hmm.
thinking they should leave them home to take care of the families and uh, take all the old retirees that spent 20 years training and getting hard take them over there and let them do the work. Send some of them young boys back home. But I knew that wasn't going to happen. That's not what happened when I got drafted. They drafted me. They didn't want some old man. But that's what I remember thinking almost daily. Why didn't they take me instead of him? Because I've been looking for this day for a while. I thought that didn't work out that way.
There's a lot of veterans and retirees and folks that serve that feel the same way as you do. And we're asking that question. I had heard that before from other veterans as well, where they wanted to sign back up and go in and serve their country. And I think that overall, it's a very difficult question because I was raised in the 80s and 90s where it was God and country, and being an American, GI Joe, fighting for what's right. You always think that, hey, if I'm put in that position, I'll go serve my country. But then we end up going to these wars like Iraq, for example. And looking back at that now, I'm going to tell you as an Iraqi veteran myself, this might be a little controversial, but even today I ask myself, why was I there? Because I don't know for sure. I was there for weapons of mass destruction, which none were ever found, and the country was completely destabilized for a long time. But I signed up for the military to serve my country, right? So it's a double-edged sword there. Like, do the right thing for the red, white, and blue. We've had family members in our own that have served our country over the years, World War II, and then Vietnam, of course, that have served proudly. So it's kind of a double-edged sword, I think, for parents to, hey, yeah, go serve your country, do the right thing. But on the other hand, it's like, are you getting put in harm's way unnecessarily for something else? I think that's what I've come to my own terms, I think, in the last 15, 20 years or so.
Yeah, I think I learned through my career that if that question comes to mind, you're better off just the question of, am I supposed to be here? Am I doing the right thing? Right. You're better off just to try to shove that question off to the side and don't even think
right.
about it. Just try to push it out of your head and listen to what your mission is. Listen to your superior officers, and whatever they say, that's my mission. I'm doing it because that's what I swore I was going to do. And is it right or wrong?
You can figure that out later.
Yeah, do that after you get out.
Right. Yeah, no doubt. I mean, I couldn't, if I was distracted my whole time there, I would not have been able to think clearly. That's actually really wise advice, because anytime, I've heard this once, that when you get your mission, you ask, where am I and what am I doing? Where am I right now? I'm at war. What am I doing? I'm fighting this war as a soldier, as a Marine, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And
whether it's right or wrong, I'm here.
Right. Right or wrong, I'm here. This is what I got to do. I got to make it. I got to survive. I got to bring everyone back. And that's it. But yeah, in the last 15 years or so, I've kind of pondered that question to myself. And like I said, I went into kind of a sleepwalk phase during that time. But taking it back to what you said earlier, when folks would ask you about me and they would ask about where I'm at, did you ever get annoyed with the idea that some folks would ask you where I'm at, and then you would tell them, and then they would go, oh, okay, well, that's in a safe area. That's behind the front lines. That's behind the redcoats.
Yeah, everybody thought that for a long time, at least this is the impression I get, for a long time, everybody thought the only bad place in Iraq was Baghdad. If you wasn't in Baghdad, you was okay. Where the hell is that place at he's at? I never heard of that one. That must be a good place, safe place. But that's what seemed to be to me, that Baghdad was Iraq. That was the war, not Baghdad.
Yeah. And what's interesting too was what I found out later on was, well, I ran into a lot of your former NCOs who were now sergeant majors when I was over there. and they looked me up and down, and they saw no Ranger tab, and they saw that gold bar on my collar, and was like, they asked me, "What the hell happened to you? Your dad was a your dad was a Ranger and was air assault, all these other things, and freaking drill sergeant for 5 years." But it was in a joking manner, of course. But also, too, I think what I found interesting later on was to find out that I had like a second cousin that was involved in the whole Blackwater ambush. And it just so happened that you had worked with him up at East Range as well for a few years. Is that right?
Yes, we did. Yeah, as soon as I saw his name, I knew he was related to your mother. And we talked and found out
Yeah.
he was a cousin.
He was from the Big Island, right? And then he retired. He was a Ranger as well. He
Yes.
retired and he obviously decided to go back into contracting with Blackwater.
Yeah, that's what I understand. Yeah.
Yeah, and he was I think one of the 3 or 4 that was ambushed there in Fallujah and was hung from the bridge, and burned. But did you even realize that at the time when I was over there?
No, I did not know. Not that I recall knowing it at that time, anyway.
Yeah, I don't think they
I'm not
really.
sure. You're the one that told me about it and exactly when that was before you went or after you came back. I'm not sure. Yeah, I remember the incident and seeing it on the news, but I didn't know he was involved in it.
How would you say that overall? I didn't know that you worked third shift just so that you can get my calls. I want to say thank you for that, because it wasn't easy sometimes calling, and I had to go to the little phone station and hope that it was working that day, hope that it wasn't knocked out. Um, but I tried to call
Oh
as
yeah,
much.
I had my phone number changed too, so you could call Wright Patterson Air Force Base vicinity in Fairborn, and I had
Yeah.
I think a Springfield number, I believe, or a Columbus phone number, and I had it changed to a Fairborn number that I still have today, and it's been several years ago.
Yeah, there was an area that I used to walk to from where I was living, and there was like these field phones that the comms unit had set up. It literally was like a OD green phones that were kind of under these concrete bunkers, and I would go there, and when you picked it up, you hit a button, and you could hear whether there was a tone there. And so if I heard the tone, I knew, oh, it's working today, so I could call. So then I would call Right Pat, and then Right Pat would patch me to you, and so that was
Mm.
one way. There was another phone bank that was on the base, but it was further away from me. And I was sitting in there one day. I think I was talking to you, and then all of a sudden, the phone just went out like that. And what had happened was a mortar had landed just outside of that, just outside of that phone bank, and had knocked out the power completely. Literally, just right outside. And I didn't. I guess when the mortar hit, it didn't explode, but it was just enough to knock out the power, and then that was it for about 2 weeks. I couldn't call for 2 weeks after that, but that's I'm sure that was a long 11 months. And during that 11 months, how do you feel like you
Shit, that's a
coped?
long living. That was a long 2 weeks when I didn't hear from you too.
How do you feel like you coped during those 11 months?
The same way you did, the way you coped with being in country and dealing with the war. Uh, I watched a lot of news. Every time the news came on, I had to be there in front of the TV, see what's going on. I want to know. I want to know what's going on. But I was like you. I was just kind of in that sleepwalking phase and just taking everything one step or one day at a time. I didn't try to overguess and not do too much thinking at one time. But I think I was in that. I knew exactly what you were talking about when you said you was kind of in a sleepwalking phase. I was too. It was really hard. It's something that I don't think any person will ever know until they're put in that position, and then they'll understand.
Yeah. That's the thing too. Is from what it sounds like today, a lot of parents are. The Army has missed its quota the last few years, and the military in general has had a very difficult time recruiting.
Mhm.
Do you have, on one hand, yes, it's difficult to send your kid off it's hard to let go. It's hard to let go. It's hard to let them grow up. But on the other hand, you have to. You have to let them grow up. So it's a double-edged sword, like I said, right? I've heard a lot of parents and anyone that's listening to this right now, if they have a kid that's thinking about joining the military, they're going to do it, whether they want to or not. What would you say to those parents?
Well, from my perspective, I've been in for 20 years, and since you made it in and out safely, it's pretty easy for me to just say, turn them loose. It's like giving a horse a rein. Let him go, and if that's what they want to do, then support them. Let them go. It's hard, nowhere near the same intensity, but when you give the kids the keys to their car when they're 16 years old and they just got their license yesterday, and they're going out with their friends and they come home at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, you worry about them. You can just kind of take that intensity of how much did you worry and multiply it by about 1,000,000 times. That's what it was like when the feet hit the ground in a combat zone. But you have to let them go, just like you have to let them have them car keys and go out on their own. And I can very well remember when I got my keys, how stupid I was when I was 16 years old. And I imagine the kids are pretty much the same today. But you just got to take that chance and let the good Lord take care of the situation and hope for the best.
Yeah,
and I can't say. There's been times that I've said I wish my son had never gone through that, because mentally I'm not sure. Because like you said, you don't talk about it a whole lot, but I know I'm proud of what you have accomplished military-wise, and I think, my opinion, I think it has made you what you are today. Without the military, I don't think you would have been the same man that you are today.
I agree. I agree big time. I tell you what, in that 1 year, in those 11 months, I grew up a lot. I grew up a lot. I learned a lot. Things that I learned there, the values, leadership wise, that I picked up there, I I still use today. It made that big of an impression on me. And I think for parents out there, I'm going to say this much. Yes, it's hard to let go, but I can tell you this much right now. I have a lot of family and friends that didn't join the military,
and they're a lot worse off than you are.
And a lot worse off than me, have gone through drug addictions, have gone through a lot of bad things. But I feel like, and here's another thing too, I feel like this, and I'm going to say this, and I don't want to sound like I'm some kind of hero or something like that, but if at my young life at 24, because I do know people that died over there that were my age, I don't want to die. Nobody wants to die. But if I were to have, if my number would have been called, at the end of the day, I think that I would have much rather have been doing that than have overdosed in my own apartment somewhere. Like at the end of the day, doing something honorable and going out, because death is the one thing that's guaranteed for everyone. Everybody, you're gonna die one way or another. You're gonna die. I would have much rather have done it, serving my country, making my family proud, and making my community proud. And it's not something I want, but
right, yeah, I think everybody understands that.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, like, it's, and it's. I know a lot of folks that died young, doing less honorable things, unfortunately. So it is a double-edged sword, and at the end of the day, it is the hard right versus the easy left, joining the military. But if you make the most of it, in my opinion, I think it can change your character, change your life, change your perspectives overall, because it gets you out from behind um, the protection of your parents, the protection of your the home you grew up in, throws you out there. I mean, I'll never forget how I felt when I left for all my different trainings, and I'll never forget how I felt that last time when I was in Hawaii. You and one of your best friends came out to see me. Um, you guys came out there for a couple of weeks before I deployed, and I remember like thinking to myself, taking you to the airport in Honolulu, and I remember thinking to myself like, this might be the last time. And I'm leaving here in the next 3 weeks or so, and I may never see them again. And that's I'll be honest with you, like even when I deployed, it was really hard. I had a nervous breakdown. I was like stressed out, and I when it and it's funny because you hear these very, very non-sensitive things being said where like folks will say, well, that's what you signed up for. Yeah, that's what I signed up for.
Yeah,
but I mean, it's not easy. It's still not easy. I think that's the worst thing. That's one of the worst things you could possibly say to anyone or any parent.
I think so. I think so. Be the last thing I wanted to hear from somebody.
Yeah, well, I've heard it before. I've heard people tell me, "Well, you deployed. It's what you signed up for." It's probably, I mean, that you're looking for an ass whooping when you say something like that to someone who signs up for to do a commendable, honorable job.
Exactly.
So, but anyways, I just wanted to put together this podcast because I wanted to capture how you felt during that time. When I had to go to war, when I had to actually go and stand in line and wait to go into the fold of everything that was happening back then, and it was incredibly difficult because everything that we saw on TV and everything, and it was real. I mean, that was everything you saw on TV was what was going on. There was IEDs, there was vehicle-borne IEDs, there was all kinds of just stupid shit going on, and that was my reality while I was over there, having gone outside the wire multiple times, and even in the capacity of a convoy platoon leader, I was also very fortunate to have experienced all that as well. I mean, I have a lifetime of stories to tell, but is there anything else, Dad, that you want to add to this this podcast, specifically talking about having a child go to war, join the military?
No, I think I can sum it up by saying that the feelings, at least the ones I had, and I'm pretty sure it's what many parents have had, is feeling is something I can feel, something I know in my heart, but it's also something I don't have any choice. I just have to take it to my grave because I cannot explain the worry. I can't explain that much worry in words. So it's just maybe me and another parent that had been through the same thing. A friend maybe had a kid going through the same thing. We could talk it over, but some other than that, it's just your feelings. That's what you gotta. You can't tell nobody. You can't explain it. I can't explain it to you. But when you have a kid go in the military and possibly put in the same situation that I was put in with you, then you'll start understanding.
Well, I want to tell you this much, that over the years you served as a role model for me, whether you realize it or not, and I know nobody's perfect by no means. You set a standard for me to live up to when I was a kid. You were one of the most badass drill sergeants, rangers that I ever knew, especially when you took me up there to East Range there at Schofield Barracks. And took me around your friends, and out there at the air assault school. That's how I grew up. I grew up as a military brat. I grew up around the military. I grew up with all the pros and the cons and the goods and the bads that come with that, the with the crazy marriages, the moving from place to place, um, never being able to really establish any good roots. A lot of young adults today don't have a strong male figure in their life. And I think that's one of the biggest problems that we have in our country today is just everyone's mental toughness and standards to live up to. And I'll say this much, like anytime I ever went through it, whether it was in training or when I was deployed, I thought about you and what you would do in that situation. And it got me through basic training. Even when I went through my deployments, man, I would look up at the stars at night and think about uh, everybody back there in Ohio and just wonder like if you guys were looking at the same stars and just thinking about, hey, I wonder if anyone's thinking about me right now. So at any rate, I just want to say thank you for providing a good base for me. Um, I'm completely content with where I'm at now, and I owe it all to you. And I just want to say thank you for being my dad, and thank you for being such a strong role model in my life.
I don't deserve much credit. You built your own man, and you have done very well. Very, very proud when you come home to introduce you to my friends that I've made out here and say, "This is my son."
Like I said, nobody's perfect by no means, but hey, we all try to do our best to make the right decisions and do the right things. And overall, I owe it to you to have the life that I have right now. So I mean that bottom of my heart.
Well, thank you. I'm glad you feel that way, but like I say, you're the one that made your own man.
So, Dad, I just want to say thank you for sharing your thoughts about the subject of today, which is having a kid going into the military specifically for war. I know it's not an easy answer, but I appreciate you sharing it with everyone and putting it out there, and I'm happy that I can capture these sort of podcasts with you.
Well, thank you much. I enjoyed it.
All right, folks. Just want to wrap this up. Dad, thanks a lot. I appreciate your time today. For everyone out there, if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. Dad, let's wrap this up. Let's get out of here. For folks out there, as always, I want you to stay tuned, stay focused, and stay motivated. Warriors, all out.